It's been about 5 years, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still smell the damp pine trees and hear that faint sound, like someone breathing just outside the tent. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip, just me and 3 friends, Dan, Clara, and Liam, camping near Lake Wren, a quiet spot deep in the forest about 2 hours from town. No cell service, no lights, just the sound of water and wind. It was perfect. We arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was dipping low, turning the lake orange as we set up our tents. Everything felt peaceful at first, the kind of quiet that feels alive, like the woods are listening. After dinner, we sat around the campfire, trading stories. I remember laughing, my face warm from the flames, while the woods behind us sank into darkness. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night. Dan joked about bears, Clara rolled her eyes, and we all crawled into our tents. I shared mine with Liam. That's when the quiet started to feel wrong. It wasn't the normal kind of silence. It was too still, like the forest was holding its breath. I tried to ignore it, listening to Liam's steady breathing beside me. But then I heard something else. Footsteps, slow, careful ones, moving through the leaves. At first, I thought it was one of the others getting up to pee, but the sound circled the tent. Not fast, just a slow, deliberate crunch of leaves, step by step. Liam was awake now, too. I could tell by the way his breathing changed. We didn't say a word. The steps stopped right beside my head. I could see the shadow through the thin nylon, tall, unmoving. Whoever it was, they were just standing there, watching. Then came the sound that still makes my skin crawl. A whisper, low, broken, right outside the tent. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like it was trying to mimic something, like someone attempting to copy a voice but getting it wrong. Liam grabbed my arm. Neither of us moved. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, every muscle frozen. After what felt like forever, the sound drifted away, fading into the trees. We didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every twig snap, every gust of wind made us flinch. But by morning, everything looked normal again. Dan said he hadn't heard anything. Clara just laughed it off, calling it forest paranoia. But when we checked the ground around our tent, there were footprints. We tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. Maybe a drunk hiker, maybe even one of us playing a joke we wouldn't admit to. But the more I looked at those footprints, the less sense it made. They weren't just around our tent. They led from the lake, straight from the water to where we'd slept. We spent the day pretending everything was fine. We went fishing, made jokes, tried to act normal. But there was a tension between us. No one wanted to talk about it, but we all kept glancing toward the trees. Anaprinakisast. Sunset. The woods felt different, heavier. The birds had stopped chirping hours earlier, and the usual sounds of crickets and frogs were gone. I remember that silence pressing on my ears, thick enough to feel. Clara wanted to head back to town, but Dan insisted we stay. He didn't want to admit he was scared, even though his hands were shaking when he lit the fire. That night, none of us went to our tents right away. We stayed by the fire until the logs were just glowing embers. I remember staring into the dark beyond the light's edge, convinced I saw movement, something tall between the trees. But every time I blinked, it was gone. Finally, sometime after midnight, Liam and I went back to our tent. I was exhausted but too wired to sleep. The forest was dead quiet again, not even the sound of wind in the leaves. Then came the tapping. It was faint at first, a soft, rhythmic sound against the tent fabric. I whispered Liam's name, but he was already awake. The tapping grew louder, moving along the side of the tent like someone dragging their fingers slowly across it. Then, breathing, right outside, like whoever it was standing inches from me, exhaling through their mouth. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Suddenly, Clara screamed from her tent, a sharp, terrified sound that sliced through the night. We jumped out, stumbling toward her voice with our flashlights shaking in our hands. But when we got to her tent, it was empty. The zipper was torn halfway down. The light from our flashlights cut through the trees, catching the edge of something pale in the distance. A shape too far to see clearly, but it looked like someone standing between the trees, watching us. Dan shouted her name, but there was no answer. The shape didn't move. It just stood there. Then, after a few seconds, it tilted its head, slow and unnatural. before stepping backward into the dark. We didn't chase it. We couldn't. We ran to the truck. Dan fumbled with the keys, hands trembling, dropping them twice before he finally started the engine. The headlights cut across the trees, and that's when we saw Clara, standing at the edge of the clearing, soaking wet. Her eyes were open, but she didn't blink. She didn't speak. She just stared at us, her lips moving soundlessly, as if trying to say something we couldn't hear. Then the lights flickered, and she was gone. We didn't stop driving until the sun came up. Nobody said a word the entire way. Every few minutes, I'd check the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her face staring back at us from the truck bed. When we reached town, Dan called the Rangers. They searched the area for 2 days and found nothing. No sign of Clara, no footprints, no torn fabric from her tent, not even her phone. It was like she had vanished into thin air. They questioned us over and over, and each time I felt like I was losing my grip on what was real. They said there were no tracks leading to or from the lake. No sign anyone had walked through the mud that night, not even ours. The ranger looked me dead in the eye and said, "You couldn't have camped where you said. That area's been underwater for months." I didn't believe him. We were there. I still had dirt on my boots, the same mud I'd stepped in outside the tent. A week later, Dan sent me a text at 2 a.m, just one line. She called me. I didn't answer. The next day I went to his house. His truck was still in the driveway, engine cold. The front door was unlocked. His phone was on the table, still open to his messages. The last one sent was to me. The police searched again, but Dan was gone, same as Clara. I haven't been back to that lake since. Sometimes, though, when it rains hard enough that the windows blur, I hear it again. That soft, wet breathing. The sound of someone standing just outside. Last month, I got a text from an unknown number. It was just a photo. 4 sets of muddy footprints, and one new pair, smaller, leading straight toward my door. The timestamp on the photo said 2:13 a.m. That was the exact time I woke up that night, because I heard the tap outside my window. I still don't have an explanation for what I saw in those woods. It was early autumn, the kind of weather where the air feels cold, but the ground still smells like summer. My friends and I decided to go camping by a small lake about 2 hours outside town. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Lucas, his girlfriend Emma, and her cousin Ryan. The lake wasn't marked on any official map, but Lucas swore he'd been there before. Said it was quiet, private, perfect for a weekend away. We got there in the late afternoon. The road turned to dirt about 10 miles out, and from there it was nothing but trees and silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring because there's just nothing. No birds, no wind, just stillness. We set up camp near the edge of the water. It was beautiful, I'll admit that. The surface of the lake looked like glass, and when the sun set, the reflection of the trees made it seem like we were surrounded by an endless forest. We built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and joked around. It felt normal, safe even. But around midnight, things started to change. I woke up to what I thought was Lucas, walking around outside the tent. I heard slow footsteps circling the campfire, crunch on the dried leaves. At first, I thought maybe he was going to the bathroom or checking on something, but the steps didn't sound like they were moving away. They just kept circling, over and over. When I whispered his name, the footsteps stopped. The air felt heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. I reached for my flashlight and pointed it toward the tent flap. Nothing, just the orange glow of the dying fire. Then, faintly, I heard it, breathing, right outside the tent. Slow, wet breathing, like someone was trying not to be heard. I froze. My heart started pounding so loud, I was sure whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. I held my breath and listened, counting the seconds. The breathing stopped, and for a while, there was only silence again. Eventually, I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe a deer. That's what I wanted to believe. I lay back down, eyes wide open, waiting for morning. But when I finally did manage to fall asleep, I woke up to something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints all around our tent, human footprints, bare ones, and they weren't any of ours. We stood around the tent that morning in complete silence. The footprints were everywhere, circling our campsite, overlapping in different directions like whoever made them had been pacing for hours. What made it worse was how deep they were, pressed firmly into the soil, as if whoever it was had been standing there, watching us for a long time. Ryan tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably one of us playing a prank, but none of us were smiling. The prints were too big to be Emma's and too narrow to be Lucas's. And barefoot, in the middle of the woods at night? It didn't make sense. We decided to pack up and leave that afternoon, but Lucas insisted we stay one more night. He said we'd come all this way, and nothing had actually happened. Maybe he was right. By noon, the sun was shining, and the woods didn't seem so creepy anymore. We even went swimming in the lake for a bit, trying to shake off the weirdness. But I couldn't stop glancing at the tree line. Something about it just felt wrong, like the forest was aware of us. As the sun went down, the feeling came back stronger. The air turned still again. No birds, no wind, no bugs. Even the lake stopped rippling. Emma was the first to mention it. She said it felt like we were being watched. Ryan told her to relax, but I could see in his eyes he felt it too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening. Every sound felt sharper. The crackling of the dying fire, the creak of the tent poles in the wind. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, careful, coming from the woods. I sat up, holding my breath. The steps stopped just a few feet from the tent. Then, a shadow moved across the fabric, tall, thin, and still. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out. I wanted to yell for Lucas, but the sound caught in my throat. Then, in the faint glow from the fire, I saw a hand press against the outside of the tent. Pale, long fingers. It dragged slowly down the fabric, leaving a dark streak behind. I grabbed Lucas's arm and shook him awake. He blinked at me, confused, until he saw the handprint. That's when he froze too. The two of us just stared at it, waiting for it to move again. But then, the hand was gone. We jumped out of the tent with our flashlights, yelling and pointing them around. Nothing, just trees and our dying campfire. No footprints this time. No sign anyone had been there. We stayed up till sunrise, sitting by the fire, too scared to sleep. But as the light started breaking through the trees, we noticed something that made my blood run cold. Across the lake, on the opposite shore, stood a figure, still, watching us, and it wasn't moving. The figure stood there for what felt like hours. The rising sun made it hard to tell if it was a person or something else, but it was tall and motionless, facing directly toward us. None of us spoke. None of us even dared to move. When the sunlight finally hit the lake, the glare covered the opposite shore for just a second, and when it faded, the figure was gone. We didn't even bother to eat breakfast. We tore the tent down, threw everything into the truck, and got out of there as fast as we could. No one said a word the entire drive back. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see someone standing in the road behind us. When we reached town, we stopped at a diner. The waitress asked if we'd been camping by the lake, and when we said yes, she just stared at us for a moment before saying, "You shouldn't go out there at night." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head and walked away. That night, after I got home, I kept thinking about the handprint, the long fingers, the way the figure stood across the lake like it knew we were watching. I tried to tell myself it was just someone messing with us, maybe another camper we didn't notice, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There had been no other campsites near ours. A few weeks later, I went through the photos we'd taken that weekend. Most were normal, the lake, the tent, us laughing. But in one picture, taken the first evening, something caught my eye. Behind us, far in the tree line, there was a figure, barely visible, tall, thin, and pale. I don't remember seeing anyone there when we took that photo. None of us do. I haven't been camping since that trip. Sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and the road cuts through the woods, I get that same uneasy feeling, like someone's watching me from between the trees. And every now and then, I swear I see a shape in my headlights, just for a second. Facing the road, I blink, and it's gone. But my heart always starts pounding again, the same way it did that night by the lake. And no matter how many years go by, I still can't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, it followed us home. It's been about 5 years, but sometimes, When I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of branches cracking somewhere just beyond the tent. It started as a simple weekend trip. My friends and I, 3 of us total, decided to go camping at a spot deep in the forest, a few hours outside town. We'd gone there before, but never this deep. The last few miles were off-road, barely a trail, and by the time we got there, the sun was already dipping below the trees. Everything looked still, too still. We set up camp by a small clearing near a lake. The air was cool and the forest was quiet. No birds, no crickets, nothing. I remember thinking it felt like the whole place was holding its breath. But we laughed it off, got the fire going, and cracked open a few beers. The flickering light from the fire made the trees look like they were swaying, even though there was no wind. Around midnight, my friends went to sleep, but I stayed up a bit longer by the fire. I liked watching the flames, the sound of burning wood, the soft pop every now and then. It was oddly relaxing. Then I heard it, a soft crunch, like someone stepping on dry leaves. At first, I thought it was one of my friends coming back out of the tent. But when I looked, both of them were still zipped inside, sound asleep. I listened harder. Another crunch, closer this time. I turned toward the tree line, but the darkness was thick. My flashlight beam barely reached a few feet before fading into black. "Hello?" I called out, half laughing to mask my nerves. No answer, just silence. Then, a faint sound, something between a whisper and a breath, came from the woods. It was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it, but I felt it. Like the air had shifted, heavier somehow. My heart started beating faster, and I suddenly became aware of how far we were from anyone else. No phone signal, no nearby camps, just miles of forest and that sound. I backed into the tent, zipped it shut, and tried to convince myself it was just an animal. Maybe a deer. That's what I told myself, at least. But as I lay there, staring up at the thin nylon roof, I heard it again. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the tent. Each step was soft, but careful. Like whoever, or whatever it was, didn't want to be heard. My breathing grew shallow, and I felt sweat forming on my palms. I could hear my friends sleeping next to me, completely unaware. The sound stopped right behind my head, and for a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, I heard it, breathing, right outside the tent, low and steady, too close to be an animal. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. I held my breath, too afraid to move, too afraid to even blink. Then, after what felt like forever, the breathing stopped. I waited. Slowly, I closed my eyes, forcing myself to believe it was gone. But when I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, I woke up a few hours later to find something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints, human ones, all around the tent, and they stopped right where my head had been. When I saw those footprints that morning, something inside me twisted. They weren't ours. The size, the direction, the depth in the mud, they were different. Someone had walked around our tent while we slept, and not just once. It looked like they'd circled it over and over again. I woke my friends up right away. They were groggy and confused, brushing it off like it was no big deal. Probably a hiker or some drunk weirdo, one of them said. But we were miles away from the nearest trail. Nobody just hiked out there. Still, I didn't argue. I just wanted to pack up and leave. But they insisted on staying one more night since we had already set everything up. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But even after breakfast, I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. Throughout the day, I kept catching myself glancing at the trees. Sometimes, I swore I saw movement, like someone slipping behind a trunk just before I looked. Once, while filling my water bottle by the lake, I heard a splash behind me, like something had thrown a rock into the water. When I turned around, there was nothing but ripples. By sunset, the forest had gone quiet again. Too quiet, just the sound of the fire crackling. My friends joked around, trying to lighten the mood, but it didn't help. I could feel the tension in the air. It was heavy, suffocating. When we finally got into the tent that night, I couldn't sleep. Every small sound, the rustle of leaves, the faint whistle of wind, made my pulse jump. I checked my phone again. No signal. Not even one bar. The only light came from the dying fire outside, flickering through the thin fabric. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, It wasn't just one set. There were at least two, maybe three. Slow, dragging steps moving through the dirt. My body froze. My friends didn't stir. They must have been in deep sleep, but I was wide awake, every nerve on edge. The steps came closer, closer, until they stopped right beside the tent. Then, the sound of breathing, deep, uneven, and wet, like whoever it was had been running. I bit down on my tongue to keep from gasping. My heart was racing so fast, I could feel it thumping in my ears. Then came a sound I'll never forget. Something dragged across the tent wall, slowly, like fingers sliding from one end to the other. I held my breath. The fabric moved slightly with each touch. Then, a shadow appeared. Someone crouching, inches away, their outline visible against the faint glow of the dying fire. I couldn't see a face, just the shape. And then, a whisper. So faint, I almost thought I was imagining it. "Come out!" It was right next to my ear. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. I shook my friend awake, but before I could even say a word, the shadow was gone. The whisper stopped, and all we could hear was the forest, completely still again. We stayed awake till sunrise. When we finally stepped outside, my stomach dropped for the second time that trip. There were more footprints, dozens of them, all around the camp. And near the edge of the clearing, something was hanging from a tree, a piece of cloth. It was from our tent. We didn't even talk about it at first. We just stood there, staring at that piece of torn fabric swaying gently in the wind. The edges were ripped, not cut, like someone had clawed it off. My friend Mark finally broke the silence. He said it had to be an animal, but even he didn't sound convinced. There were no bite marks, no signs of struggle, just that long, deliberate tear in those footprints. We packed up as fast as we could. No breakfast, no conversation, just the sound of zippers, snapping tent poles, and heavy breathing. I could feel eyes on us the whole time, like something was still there, hidden among the trees. Every time a twig snapped, I flinched. Every gust of wind made me turn. The road back to civilization was hours away. Our truck was parked near the old service road, about half a mile from camp. When we finally got to it, I felt some relief wash over me. The moment we slammed the doors shut, it was like a bubble of safety had formed around us. But as we started driving, something strange happened. About 15 minutes into the drive, I glanced out the window and noticed something on the passenger side mirror. Smudges, long, thin smudges like fingerprints dragged downward. At first, I thought it was dirt or condensation, but when I wiped the glass, the marks didn't fade. They were on the inside. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to freak the others out. But the farther we drove, the colder it got inside the truck. We turned the heater up, but it didn't help. It felt like the air itself had gone still. Then Mark, who was driving, slowed down suddenly. "Do you guys see that?" he whispered. Up ahead, standing right in the middle of the road, was a person. No movement, no sound, just a dark silhouette facing our direction. We couldn't see the face because of the glare from the headlights, but they weren't standing like someone lost or scared. They were perfectly still, waiting. We stopped the truck about 50 feet away. Nobody spoke. After what felt like forever, the figure slowly stepped to the side of the road and disappeared into the forest. Mark hit the gas and didn't stop until we reached the main highway. When we finally made it home, everyone agreed not to talk about it. We just wanted to forget. But a few days later, I noticed something that made me realize it wasn't over. I was unloading my backpack when I found a small object inside one of the side pockets. Something I definitely hadn't packed. A piece of cloth, the same kind as the tent fabric that had been ripped off. Only this one had writing on it. Messy, faint handwriting, almost like it had been scratched in with something sharp. It said, "Next time, don't leave so soon." That was 3 years ago. I've never been camping since. And sometimes, late at night, when my house gets too quiet, I swear I can still hear that whisper, just barely above the sound of my breathing. "Come out." Every time I think about it, I get this heavy feeling in my chest, like I'm back there again, surrounded by the trees, listening to the forest breathe. It started as a simple weekend trip. There were 4 of us. Me, my friend Caleb, his girlfriend Jess, and her cousin Tyler. We wanted to go somewhere quiet, far from the city. So Caleb found this camping spot deep in the woods near an old lake. It wasn't an official campsite, just a clearing he'd heard about from a co-worker. The drive there took almost 4 hours. By the time we got there, the sun was already low, glowing orange through the trees. It was one of those places that felt untouched. No cell service, no noise, no other people. Just the sound of wind moving through leaves and the occasional crack of branches under our boots. We set up camp by the lake. The water was still, like a mirror, and the reflection of the tree line made it look twice as deep. It was beautiful, but there was something about the silence that didn't sit right with me. Usually in the woods, you hear birds or bugs or something, but this place, it was almost too quiet. That first night, we made a fire and joked around, roasted marshmallows, told ghost stories, the usual. Everything felt normal until sometime after midnight, when the fire had burned low and the cold started creeping in. We decided to turn in. I remember lying in my tent, half asleep when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, and deliberate, like someone walking around the camp, circling. At first, I thought it was Caleb or Tyler going to the bathroom, but then I realized the steps weren't moving away. They were moving around. I held my breath and listened. The fire outside had gone out, so it was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing, but I could hear the crunch of dry leaves. Close, too close. Then, silence. I waited for a voice, for someone to say something, but nothing came. Just the faint sound of the lake rippling. Eventually, I convinced myself it was an animal and forced myself to sleep, though it took a long time. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every sound, the rustle of fabric, the creak of my sleeping bag, felt amplified in the dark. When I woke up the next morning, the others were already outside. Caleb looked pale. He said he'd heard it too. Footsteps around his tent around 1 a.m. Jess thought we were just trying to freak her out, but when we checked the ground near our tents, there were prints in the dirt. Not boot prints, bare feet. And the weirdest part was, they were small, like a child's. The moment I saw those prints, something in me shifted. It wasn't just weird, it felt wrong. We were deep in the forest, miles from the nearest town. There shouldn't have been a child out there, walking barefoot in the cold, in the middle of the night. Caleb tried to brush it off, saying maybe someone from a nearby cabin wandered through. But there were no cabins, no signs of people. We'd driven for hours and passed nothing but trees and dirt roads. Still, we tried to laugh it off and went about our day, hiking, fishing, pretending everything was normal. But I couldn't shake that feeling that we weren't alone. Every now and then, I'd catch movement in the corner of my eye, like a shadow slipping behind a tree. Once, I thought I heard a giggle, soft and distant, carried by the wind. I looked toward the sound, but there was nothing. Even the air felt heavier there, like it didn't move right. That evening, just before sunset, Caleb found something strange near the edge of the woods. A small pile of stones stacked neatly, almost like a tiny tower. On top of it, there was a smooth, round rock painted white. It looked deliberate, almost like a marker. Tyler thought it was some kind of trail sign, but the formation felt too personal, like it was meant for us. We agreed to leave it alone and went back to camp. But that night, the atmosphere changed completely. The air was colder, and the silence was deeper. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Jess went to bed early, and Tyler followed soon after. Caleb and I stayed by the fire, drinking and trying to convince each other that it was just our imagination. Around midnight, the fire started dying, and we were about to head to our tents when Caleb froze. His eyes locked on something across the lake. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At first, I didn't, but then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw it, a figure standing among the trees. Still, motionless. It looked small, maybe 4 feet tall. The shape was wrong, though. Too thin, the limbs slightly bent at odd angles. I thought maybe it was just the way the moonlight hit the trees. But then it moved. One step forward, then another, slow and soundless. I felt my chest tighten, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But I couldn't. I just sat there, staring, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Caleb reached for his flashlight, but when he clicked it on, the beam cut through the dark, and the figure was gone, just gone. We stayed up the rest of the night, barely speaking, listening for any sound, any sign of movement. There was nothing. but I swear I could feel eyes on us, watching, waiting. By morning, we'd made up our minds to leave. But when we started packing, we found something sitting right where the fire had been the night before. A white-painted rock, just like the one on that pile near the woods. None of us said anything for a long time. We just stared at that rock sitting perfectly centered in the ashes, as if someone had carefully placed it there while we slept. Jess started crying quietly. Tyler looked sick. Caleb tried to act tough, but his hands were shaking when he picked up the tent poles. We packed faster than I thought possible. None of us even ate breakfast. The only sound was the zip of tents, the crunch of our shoes against the dirt, and the faint rustling of leaves that never seemed to stop. It didn't feel like wind. It felt like something breathing, slow, steady, patient. As we loaded the last of our stuff into the car, I turned to look back one last time. The woods were completely still. No birds, no movement. But right there at the tree line, barely visible through the fog, I thought I saw it again. That same small figure, standing just between the trees. This time, closer. I didn't say anything. I just got in the car and told Caleb to drive. We didn't stop until we hit the main road. And even then, nobody spoke. It wasn't until we got back to town that Caleb finally broke the silence. He said he wanted to check the footage from the camera he'd left on a tripod near the campfire. We'd set it up earlier that evening, before everything happened. When he played the video later that night, we watched ourselves sitting by the fire, talking. The sound of crackling wood, laughter, everything normal. Then, around midnight, the fire dimmed, just like we remembered. But as the video went on, something started moving in the background, between the trees. It wasn't clear at first, just a faint shadow. Then it stepped closer into the light. It wasn't a child. It wasn't anything I could name. Its face looked wrong, smooth and pale, with dark holes where eyes should have been. It stood there watching us, completely still for nearly 2 minutes. Then it turned its head toward the camera, and the video cut to black. Caleb swore he didn't touch it. We all saw his hand wasn't anywhere near the recorder. We stopped talking about it after that. We never went camping again. A few months later, I drove past that area on my way to another town. The road curved near the forest, and for a moment, I glanced out the window. There, just at the edge of the trees, someone had built another small pile of stones, and on top of it, a single white rock. I didn't stop to look closer. I just kept driving. And sometimes, at night, when everything's quiet, I swear I can still hear the soft crunch of footsteps on dirt, circling closer, waiting. It was supposed to be a quick weekend camping trip with 2 of my closest friends, just a few hours outside town. We'd done it before. Same forest, same campsite, same routines. But that weekend, something felt off from the moment we arrived. We got there around late afternoon. The sun was dipping low, bleeding orange light through the trees. The forest looked different this time, quieter. Usually you could hear birds, maybe the wind moving through the branches. But that day, it was almost completely silent. No sound at all, except the crunch of our boots against the ground and the occasional rustle from the gear we were carrying. Tyler, my friend, joked about it, said it felt like the woods were holding their breath. I laughed it off, but inside, I kind of felt the same. We set up camp near a small clearing, not far from a lake. The air smelled damp and heavy, like the kind of air that comes before a storm. We built a small fire, cooked dinner, and sat around talking until the stars came out. It was peaceful for a while. We even made plans to wake up early for a hike. But as the night went on, the quiet turned uneasy. It was subtle at first. The fire crackled softer, and the air grew colder. The woods around us seemed to close in, shadows stretching longer than they should. When the wind finally did start blowing, it carried this strange, faint sound, like someone walking slowly through leaves, just outside the reach of the firelight. I thought it was maybe an animal, but the steps stopped every time we spoke, then started again, and we went quiet. By midnight, the fire was dying down. Tyler went into his tent first, then Sarah. I stayed up a bit longer, just staring into the fire. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to convince myself I wasn't hearing what I thought I was hearing. But then I caught a glimpse of something. Movement just beyond the trees. A pale shape there 1 second, gone the next. I froze. staring into the darkness, my heart hammering in my chest. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They stopped right at the edge of our camp. I wanted to call out, but my throat tightened. I could feel every beat of my pulse in my ears. The fire flickered once, then went still. Something was standing just beyond the light. I could hear breathing, low, uneven, like someone trying not to be heard. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The air went completely still again. I stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at that same spot. When the sun finally came up, there was nothing there. But I found something later that morning that made my stomach drop. Just a few feet from where I'd been sitting all night, right at the edge of the trees, were footprints, bare ones, small, like a child's. We all saw them that morning. Tyler crouched down, tracing one of the prints with his finger, then looked up at me like he was waiting for an explanation. I didn't have one. They were too small to belong to any of us, and too fresh to have been there long. The dirt was soft from the night dew, and you could even see where the toes pressed deeper into the soil, like whoever it was had been standing there, watching. Sarah got uneasy right away. She wanted to pack up and leave, but Tyler insisted it was just some local kid playing around. The problem was, we were miles away from any houses or even a main road. We tried to shake it off and spent the rest of the morning fishing by the lake, but the woods didn't feel the same anymore. It was like something unseen was moving around us, always just out of sight. Every few minutes, we'd hear branches snap or the faint crunch of leaves somewhere nearby, but whenever we turned, there was nothing. By late afternoon, even Tyler had gone quiet. We ended up deciding to head back to camp early, maybe leave before dark, but when we got there, something was off again. Our tents looked the same from a distance, but as soon as I got closer, I noticed one of the zippers was open. Not all the way, just a few inches, enough to see inside. My stomach twisted. I was sure I'd zipped mine completely that morning. I checked my tent first. Everything inside was untouched, except for my flashlight. It was lying on the ground, still on, batteries dead. I hadn't used it since the night before. Sarah's tent was fine, but Tyler's wasn't. His sleeping bag had been dragged halfway out, like someone had pulled it and then stopped. He started laughing nervously, saying it must have been an animal. But there weren't any claw marks or tears, just drag lines in the dirt, shaped like fingers. The sun started dipping again, and the thought of another night out there made my skin crawl. We agreed to leave as soon as we could pack. That's when we heard it. From somewhere in the trees. A sound, a faint hum. It wasn't a bird or an animal. It sounded like a voice, high-pitched, distant, almost like someone singing softly to themselves. Sarah froze. Tyler dropped the pan he was holding, and it clattered against a rock. The humming stopped for a few seconds, then picked up again, closer this time. We couldn't tell what direction it was coming from. It felt like it was circling us. I tried to play it off as an echo, maybe the wind-carrying sound from far away. But then I saw movement again, between two trees. A shape, pale and small, standing completely still. Sarah saw it too. She whispered my name, but before I could answer, the thing turned. Not fast, just a slow, jerky twist, like its neck didn't move right. Then it stepped backward into the shadows and disappeared. Tyler cursed, grabbed his keys, and said we were leaving right then. None of us argued. We threw everything into the truck and drove off the trail, dirt and rocks kicking up behind us. I didn't look back until we hit the main road, but I wish I hadn't looked at all, because standing at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the fading light, was that same small shape, watching. We didn't talk for most of the drive back. The road was empty and silent except for the hum of the tires and the occasional rattle of our gear in the back. It felt like the world outside had gone completely still. No wind, no night insects, nothing. Just the dark outline of the forest sliding past. About an hour in, Sarah finally broke the silence. She asked if I saw its face. I told her no, I hadn't. I just saw the shape, the way it moved. But she said she did. Said it was pale, almost gray, and the eyes looked wrong. Too wide, too empty. Tyler snapped at her to stop talking, said she was just imagining things. But he was gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes kept darting to the mirrors like he was expecting something to be following us. Eventually, we hit the highway, and started to relax a little. I remember thinking that maybe it really was just some weird trick of light, or a lost hiker who didn't want to be seen. That's what I told myself anyway. Then, just as we passed the old mile marker near the county line, the radio came on by itself. It wasn't static. It was that same soft humming, the same tune. None of us said a word. Tyler hit the power button, but the radio wouldn't turn off. The volume knob didn't do anything either. It just kept humming, low and steady, like someone whispering a song from far away. Sarah started crying quietly. I remember my heart pounding so hard it made my chest ache. I leaned forward and yanked the keys out of the ignition. The truck went dead, headlights off, engine off, but the radio kept humming. That sound filled the cab. I could feel it vibrating through the seat, through my bones. It got louder and louder until it almost sounded like words, but I couldn't make them out. Then it stopped. Total silence. We just sat there, too scared to move. Tyler finally turned the keys again, and the truck started like nothing happened. The radio was off. We didn't say anything the rest of the way home. Sarah transferred schools a few months later. Tyler quit trucking altogether. I still talk to him sometimes, but we never bring that night up. The weird part? A week after it happened, I was unpacking my gear and found something in my tent bag that shouldn't have been there. A small, muddy footprint, smeared across the inside fabric. It was the size of a child's, and it was pressed from the inside out.